Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to focus on um, one particular race, the Dark Folk. I've been making a couple different types of Darklands races that derive from the ancient Aslanti people. So included in that are the Gillmen, which Pies already did, so I don't have to restat that. Um, I got the Dark Folk, which I'm going to talk about here momentarily. I'm also working on the Grimlocks. Pathfinder never put out anything for the Grimlock. I just instead chose to go with the Morlock. So I'm working on the Grimlock as a option. I'm just trying to clarify some of the rules for players in terms of using blind sight and also blind. So just trying to work out the mechanics in that as best I can. And then I'll eventually get to the Morlocks. But I did my own version of the Pure Blood as Lanti, were they to survive, and they're a secretive but emergent race. But for this one, kind of going with more of the degenerate descendants. I'm going with the Dark Folk as part of my next video here in the long line of, or short line, of derived Aslanti races. So, Dark Folk, they're really interesting. I like them a lot. I liked running a couple of them a few times in the past with Dark Folk NPCs. On Bestiary 2 in the back, you can actually see one of them as far as looking at the art for them. There's like 3 different types, if I'm correct on that. And the CRs are around CR2, CR3, CR4 or 5. So they're not too high. It's not too difficult to make sure the racial points are not blown up there. But here's like the Dark Creeper. He's a different type of Dark Folk. Just in case you weren't sure what they looked like. And then there it's the Dark Stalker. And then in Bestiary 2 they actually had the third one listed here, which is the Dark Slayer. I think that's probably like the better type there. The more powerful version. Oh no, sorry, Darkstalker CR4. So this one's not exactly the more powerful one, but definitely a wielder of magics and such. So 3 different types, and using the Advanced Race Guide as sort of the mechanics behind creating PC races, player character races. I kind of use this always, just as I have some kind of form of balance. Of course, people say that this isn't exactly balanced, but what is? Depending on how you interpret things. But with this, at least I got some kind of a guideline, especially trying to follow on a rule with points, weighted costs for adding abilities and such. So I prefer to use this rather than just kind of completely taking on just the art form of design the race from the ground up. At least to have some kind of reference to go with it. This kind of helps me kind of keep most of my races I create from kind of imploding. So, using this book, I've made a Dark Folk. They're complete. I'll go over those now. The Dark Folk, I got them to weighted costs of 13 racial points. I really like that because a lot of my races lately have been 17 points or so. So at least I got this down a little bit lower, so they're at the advanced race category, but they're not too out there. So the type, they're of course humanoid with the dark folk subtype. Size small. Normal speed, so 30 feet. Ability score modifiers, I went with specialized for 1 cost there. +2 to Dex, +2 to Con, and -2 to Charisma. Some people would argue that maybe the intelligence should have a negative point there, you know, -2, but since they sort of employ more magics and such, and because they were derived from the Aslanti race, I feel a little strange about, you know, giving a -2 to intelligence. So since intelligence and charisma are kind of the lower stats there, I went with charisma, just based on their appearance, how they would interact with other races, and being a Darklands race, and possibly, potentially, being used on the surface and such. -2, probably for their dealings with most of society, or their lack to change, interact. So languages, standard. What they're listing in the bestiary, though, suggests that they have a xenophobic language, just a racial language only, which is actually dark folk, is part of their, or which is their defined language type. But I went with standard, just so that they could have that chance to interact, and maybe this is more of a sociable sort of a aspect placed on the dark folk, since both don't really cost anything, so it could be either one. Now for the other racial traits, like the feat and skill racial traits, I went with underground sneak. And with that, they get a +2 racial bonus on craft, alchemy, perception, and stealth checks. The bestiary one doesn't really list anything with craft alchemy, but since they can use poison, they have the ability of poison use where they're skilled with poison and never risk accidentally poisoning themselves when applying it to their weapons. I thought, you know, having the craft alchemy would kind of explain some of that, rather than giving them a racial bonus for climb. That's just my take on it. But also with the, let me look up one thing here, just to go over this a little further. Underground sneak. The bonus on stealth checks increased to a +4 bonus while underground, so they have a little bit of a additive to their stealth when using their homeland terrain of the underground nature. Let's see what else we got here. So that was a cost of 5. And now magical racial traits. They can use detect magic at will. So I went with the constant spell like Divination for 3 points, where they can use detect magic at will. And some of their, or I should say most of their, the different three types there, they can use darkness. I think at will seemed a little bit excessive. Plus, I really didn't see anything in the advanced race guide to suggest that they could use that at will without it being beyond their ability within the advanced category. So I went with the spell-like ability lesser with darkness for a cost of 2, so they can use it once a day. Just so they're not employing that consistently, which seemed like there could be a balance issue there possibly. Offensive racial traits, I went poison use. 1 weighted cost there. Other racial traits, this is not really in there. It's a homebrew version that I added here. For the death throes, upon their death, The different types, they can explode violently, either with some sort of fireball, some sort of sonic blast, maybe. That kind of reminds me of the Draconians from Dragonlance. Just when they die, there's some sort of terrific explosion where they either turn to stone or a fireball goes off. Or so just like with the Dark Folk, they do have a death row sort of contingency there. I gave it a weighted cost of -1. Um, and what I chose to do with that is when a Dark Folk is slain, its body erupts in a release of energy. Its gear and treasure are unaffected by this effect. I didn't really want to put on there, potential party members could get hurt in this blast. Plus, trying to decide which type of one to do, if it's going to be some sort of sonic implosion or fireball immolation thing. I didn't want to really specifically choose one, so I just went with their body releases in a blast of energy. Not really citing that there's any damage there, just more of a thematic look to it. And it already seems kind of penalty enough that that also implies that there would be no resurrection allowed, because there would be nothing left of its body. So maybe you have to go with like a wish or true resurrection or something like that to bring that person back. And senses racial traits. They can all see in darkness. And with that, it's a weighted cost of 4 points. So Dark Folk can see perfectly in darkness of any kind, including that created by spells such as Deeper Darkness. That's one really strong trait that they have. Weakness racial traits, -2 for their light blindness, since they all seem to have that. Any exposure to bright light blinds Dark Folk for 1 round, and on subsequent rounds they are dazzled as long as they remain in the affected area. So that kind of completes it there for the build. But as far as alternate racial traits that you could swap out, there's one. Okay, there's 2 that are small, and then there's 1 that is medium in size. So of course I allowed that option that maybe the one that you chose was taller than the rest of their kin. So medium, you can easily swap that out. You just replace the small trait for the medium trait. And then the last one on here was Soul Harvest. One of the Dark Folk type. When they damage a flat-footed foe or a foe that is flanking with a melee touch spell or spell-like ability that deals hit point damage, the spell does an additional 1d6 points of damage, and the Dark Folk gains an equal amount of temporary hit points. These temporary hit points last for a maximum of 1 hour. So I listed that this racial trait replaces Dark Folk magic, which would be the detect magic at will and the spell-like ability of darkness once per day. So the Soul Harvest would replace both of those. So there's an even swap out of racial points there. So that's all I got. This is kind of be a little bit of a short video here. So yeah, my next one will be the Grimlock, which is almost done, and then eventually the Morlock here. So maybe I'll have those out in the next week or 2. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions on this. I've been kind of collaborating with someone on the Paizo forums, going back and forth on this Dark Folk race, and I like it the way it's at right there. But of course, you can take this and make your own choices on this one, electing which ones you would use or not use. But yeah, that's all I got, and stay tuned for the upcoming Grimlock. See ya.